Geology as a verdict, a fiery foundation. Our immersion in the history of Stirling begins not with stone but with fire. 350 million years ago, when the continents were still looking for their places on the map, a volcano erupted here. The lava solidified, forming a colossal volcanic plug, a solid basalt monolith which turned out to be stronger than the land itself around it. For millions of years, glaciers flowed around this obstacle, cutting off the edges and forming vertical cliffs. Thus Castle Hill was born. When the first Stone Age people set foot on these lands, they saw not just a mountain but an ideal bastion. On three sides an abyss that makes your head spin. On the fourth a steep climb that turns any assault into suicide. The name Stirling comes from the Celtic stir meaning mountain and linn meaning river. It is the point where rock meets water and the lowlands meet the highlands. Whoever owned this hill held the narrow throat of the whole country in their hands. Stirling was and remains the key to Scotland. Shadows of Rome and the First Kings. As the Roman legions advanced north, their engineers immediately appreciated the strategic potential of this height. They built the fortress of Irdu here. We can only guess what this ancient logistics looked like, how thousands of tons of materials were lifted to such a height without modern cranes. It was a triumph of discipline over the landscape. After the Romans, the fortress fell into disrepair, but the strategic point could not remain empty for long. In 1110, King Alexander I built the first full-fledged castle here. It was Stirling that he chose as his residence, and it was here within these walls that he ended his earthly journey. Since then, the castle has become not just a fort, but a sacred place of the Scottish monarchy. Warwolf, the engineered terror of 1304. We often think of medieval sieges as chaotic, but the siege of Stirling in 1304 was both a triumph and a horror of military engineering. King Edward I of England, known as the Hammer of the Scots, held the castle under siege for 3 long months. The Scots inside were doomed, but they held out. Edward ordered the construction of the Warwolf, the largest trebuchet in world history. 50 carpenters worked on it day and night. It was a megastructure for its time. When the castle's defenders saw this wooden monster, they hoisted the white flag. But Edward, he was a fanatic about his design. He refused to surrender and ordered the Scots back into the castle. He wanted to see his machine tear down the walls. A 300-pound rock flew through the air, shattering not only the walls but also Stirling's belief in impregnability. It was a war of attrition in materials and souls. Wallace and the Bruce, battles that changed everything. Stirling has seen more blood than any other fortress in Britain. The Battle of Stirling Bridge in 1297 became a legend thanks to William Wallace. It was not just a skirmish, it was a tactical masterpiece. Wallace exploited the geography of the River Forth, luring the English onto a narrow wooden bridge. When half the enemy army had crossed, the bridge became a bottleneck. The Scots struck. The River Forth was red with blood, and from the castle towers watched those who understood that Stirling was becoming free again. In 1314, during the legendary Battle of Bannockburn, the fate of the castle hung in the balance again. Robert the Bruce knew that without Stirling, independence was impossible. The castle was besieged at least 8 times. Its walls remember the blows of battering rams, the whistle of arrows, and the roar of the first cannons. A mask for a monster, the golden age of the Stuarts. As we move into the 16th century, the Jacobean era, Stirling ceases to be just a rough pile of stones. It becomes an illusion. The Scottish crown was trying to prove to the world that they were not just wild Highlanders on the edge of the earth, but full-fledged players in big politics. Here a strange, almost schizophrenic contrast arises. Outside it is austere fortress walls, ready to be bombarded by heavy artillery. But inside, a new royal palace. It is like finding a piece of jewelry inside a rusty battle helmet. Stirling's head's wooden Panopticon. Lift your eyes up to the ceiling of the Great Hall. Once upon a time, Stirling's heads looked down on you from their 56 oak medallions. This is not just a decoration. This is a wooden Panopticon, kings, heroes, and mythical creatures. All of them were carved with such detail that it seemed as if these eyes were watching your every step. Below wine, laughter, and secret conspiracies. Above 56 silent witnesses who record your every gesture in the memory of the oak. It was a medieval social raiding. You were always under the supervision of monsters and ancestors. French chic on Scottish blood. James V brought architectural chic from France but planted it on Scottish granite. He combined the lightness of French lines with the heavy German sobriety. This created a unique architectural oxymoron. You see the delicate carvings on the stone and the ancient guards, but they are located at arm's length from the brutal loopholes. Elegance in the ring of the environment. The Scottish kings wanted to live in the Renaissance, but they knew that this Renaissance could be stitched with an English core at any moment. Fragile beauty, clamped in the iron grip of the rock. Holyrood, a shrine that survived the ashes. Not far from the castle stands the Church of the Holy Cross Holyrood. It has stood here since 1129. This is the only church in Scotland, apart from Westminster, where services are still held and where the walls remember the touch of royal crowns. In 1543, 9-month-old Mary Stuart was crowned here. When a great fire in the 15th century wiped the city off the face of the earth, turning Stirling into black ash, the church stood firm. The stone proved stronger than the fire. People whispered that it was not the beams that held it up, but the spirits of the Stuart dynasty. For them, it was not just a building, but an anchor that held the nation above the abyss. Stirling's shadows, a sponge for memory. Stirling is such as a sponge. Over the centuries, it has absorbed the memories of thousands of lives, their fears, ambitions, and last breaths. There is no real silence here. The Green Lady, the shadow of the maid who saved the queen from the flames by sacrificing herself. She appears in the dark passages before another disaster comes to the castle. The Pink Lady, an elegant figure in a silk dress, leaving behind the scent of flowers in the middle of a fierce Scottish winter. She walks through closed doors, ignoring the laws of physics. They are not just ghosts. They are constant reminders that the castle does not belong to tourists, but to history. Alchemist and Flight into the Abyss, John Damian. At the beginning of the 16th century, during the reign of James IV, a mysterious Italian named John Damian appeared in the castle. He called himself an alchemist and promised the king to find the philosopher's stone to turn lead into gold for the Scottish treasury. But the real madness happened in 1507. Damian announced that with the help of occult knowledge, he would be able to fly from Stirling to France. He built huge wings from bird feathers and jumped from the highest wall of the castle. Of course, he fell down with a stone, breaking his hip. Damian himself explained the failure as a technical error. They say the wings had chicken feathers, and chickens are terrestrial creatures, so they pulled him to the ground. Locals whispered that Damian was trying to escape from demons he himself had summoned in Stirling's labs. They say that on windy nights at the foot of the cliff, you can hear the sound of wings flapping, never to lift their owner into the sky. Not in the shadows of Camelot. At the foot of Castle Hill is a strange geometric structure made of earth and grass, King's Knot. From above, it looks like a perfect maze or an ancient scheme. Archaeologists say that these are the remains of 17th century gardens, but mystics are sure that this was the real site of King Arthur's Round Table. At dusk, when the mist from the River Forth envelops these geometric patterns, it seems that the earth beneath them breathes. There is a belief that the knot is a portal. If you walk along a certain route on the night of Samhain, you can hear the clanking of knights' armor waiting for their return. This is the perfect visual for your video, perfect geometry in the midst of wild nature, which looks like a frozen program code of the ancient world. Beheading Stone, the Curse of Mote Hill. North of the castle is Mote Hill, where lies a gloomy artifact, the so-called Beheading Stone. It is closed with an iron grate like a wild beast. For centuries, traitors and enemies of the crown have been beheaded here. Myth says that the stone was so soaked with the blood of aristocrats that it acquired a will of its own. Stalkers say that if you touch it on a cold night, you can feel not icy metal, but the warmth of living flesh. They say that the souls of the executed still wander the hill, trying to find their lost bodies in the castle's casemates. This is a true noir, a story about justice that has turned into an eternal curse. The Highlander ghost, the Sentinel who never retired. This myth is relatively modern but no less eerie. In the 1960s, when the castle was still home to the military, sentries repeatedly reported seeing a strange officer in a traditional kilt and full 19th century ceremonial armor. He would appear out of nowhere, walk past the post, and disappear into a blank wall. The most interesting thing is that he didn't look like a transparent ghost. The soldiers mistook him for a real person, until he dissolved into thin air right before their eyes. They say that this was one of the castle's defenders, who was so afraid of missing an enemy attack that even death was not a reason for him to leave his post. The Curse of the Stirling Heads. The same oak medallions on the ceiling of the palace Stirling Heads. Each of them has a unique facial expression. There is a legend that the master carvers were Freemasons and invested a certain emotion or sin in each face. They say that if you look at a certain head for a long time, it begins to change its expression, namely either smiling or winking. In 1777, the ceiling collapsed, and according to local legend, the medallions scattered throughout the neighborhood. People who took them home as souvenirs began to complain of nightmares and misfortunes. The castle seemed to demand its artifacts back. Only after they were returned and restored did relative peace again reign in the halls of the royal palace. But their gaze still remains heavy, as if they know something about each visitor that they themselves are trying to hide. From crown to bayonet, regression and revival. In 1685, the castle changed professions. Luxury gave way to pragmatism. Stirling became a military fortress. During the Napoleonic Wars, the halls that once received ambassadors were turned into barracks. It was a strange, almost blasphemous adaptation. Where kings once listened to the lute, soldiers of the Highlanders cleaned their rifles and sharpened bayonets. In 1855, fire came to its rescue again. A terrible fire almost put an end to the history of the fortress. Robert Billings' restoration was an attempt to roll back the system, to return the castle to its original appearance. It lasted a century. Only in 1964 did the military finally leave these walls, consigning them to eternity. The stone that has overcome time. Today, Stirling is not a museum. It is a living engineering organism that breathes with this land. If you climb the hill of Abbey Craig to the 67-meter Wallace Tower, you can see the true scale of this game. The castle stands on volcanic rock, unbreakable, gloomy, eternal. It has seen the legions of Rome, heard the roar of the first guns, and seen Nazi planes in its sky. Borders have changed, states have disappeared, but Stirling has remained in place. This is a stone that has overcome time not by strength, but by endurance. Every crack in its walls is a line in a book that Scotland has been writing for 1,000 years. And we have just turned one page. Thanks for watching, my friend. Don't forget to watch our other videos and learn new mysteries. We have a lot more interesting things in store for you. Do you think a stone can really remember what it saw? Or is it just our imagination trying to fill the void of the old corridors? Write in the comments. Leave your questions and wishes in the comments. What should we tell you about next time?